Thanks for joining us on another episode of Beyond the Listing. I'm your host, Jeremy Madore.
And I'm Danielle Downs.
We are going to be talking about the business of real estate beyond the listing. And today we're going to be interviewing a non-realtor yet kind of realtor guest. And he is wonderfully positioned to interface with agents in his office that he is a very large part of.
Yep.
And we'll talk about that. I'm not going to jump the shark on that, but he brings with him a very diverse background throughout areas of real estate as well as professional life that allow him to have a unique perspective on how agents treat their own marketing strategies. And so it was a really, really great pleasure to have him on. And he provided some really good wisdom and insight. So I'm really hoping that our agents take a listen for some of his feedback. The things that he's talking about, they really come from the heart and the soul. They're not necessarily tried and true scientific methods of success. It's truly like homegrown, heartfelt, how you pursue life holistically and how you pursue your business as a result like that. So basically aligning your values with your client's values to achieve the best possible outcome for everybody involved and how that goes back into your business long-term. So it was a really interesting conversation. So.
He seemed really excited to be here, which that was great. You know, I know he wanted to be on the show and tried to move mountains to come on last week when we thought the storm was coming.
Yeah. Tell our viewers a little bit how that one went.
I canceled everything. I mean, we canceled all appointments. You canceled interviews. You canceled podcasts.
Yeah.
Everything.
And
then there was an inch at best, depending on where you were.
And we were slated to get
9 to 12 plus in this region, especially, which that was a big miss. I mean, no hate to everybody was on the same page. Everybody was on the same page.
Right.
There was it was so dramatic. Like I remember leaving here on Monday at like 1 p.m. and it was still 9 to 12. And then by 3 p.m. it was like 1 to 3.
Yeah.
And then even at like 6 p.m. we still got school canceled.
Sure.
Which we already knew at that point it was only going to be 1 to 3, but I was like, oh,
yeah,
all right.
It's the whole information that I have at the time kind of thing.
And I was like, well, I assumed we were going to be home anyways because of all the planning. So yeah, that was wild. That was a big miss.
It was a big miss.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating for me because obviously with the drive that I make in order to do these podcasts, as well as do the in-person interviews for the new personnel that we're hiring, it does require me lining up a lot of personal stuff and carving out that time. So that was definitely a challenge, but I'm glad it worked out that way. We're in school vacation week right now, and
Jen got to come down too.
Jen, my wife got to come down, so that was really fantastic. We got to have a nice date night at Forge and Vine in Groton last night.
Nice.
Fantastic place.
I've never been.
Really, really enjoyable. We should definitely have a company outing there.
Yeah.
If not just back end, or whatever.
That'd be nice.
But it would be, it's a really nice place. A great service, fantastic food.
I've heard really good things about it. Never a bad thing. Never a negative thing.
Yeah. We've never had a bad experience. And the ambiance in there is fantastic.
Really?
Really nice. A lot of wood and metal and just, they make it feel rustic without making it feel like a barn.
Sure.
So it's got a wonderful vibe in there and stuff, but anyway, so everything worked out. And like you said, our guest moved mountains to make sure that last Tuesday happened. And then again, today, Wednesday,
everybody
happened,
was really flexible and I appreciate that. And same with when we canceled the appointments, everybody seemed to be on the same page anyways, clients
they're all seeing the same thing.
Nobody wants to try to do, cleaning of a house or staging of a house in the middle of a snowstorm and shoveling. And it's just chaotic. And we don't want people on the road for that. That's dangerous. So.
No, we definitely want to, err on the side of caution.
Yep. Safety first.
Anyway, so without further ado, let's get to our interview.
All right.
Thanks for joining us for another episode. I'm your host, Jeremy Madore, and today I'm sitting with
Anthony DiZuzio, team leader at Keller Williams North Central and Fitchburg native.
I'm really happy to have you in the studio and excited to get into our conversation.
Same.
So you and I had a fantastic, very brief, but very fantastic, pointed conversation at the NICMAR Awards Gala a few weeks ago.
Yeah. We just caught each other in passing, which was fun.
Yeah. And towards the end too, it wasn't even like we set out to have that conversation. And you had said some things that really resonated with me pertaining to your new role in KW North Central.
Yeah.
And some of the common challenges that you as a team lead, right? That's
Yeah. So I'm team leader. Management's the wrong word. I'm kind of growing and helping 152 agents in their businesses.
Yeah.
And that comes at varying levels.
Yeah.
Like people are new to the business. They're 20 years in the business.
Sure.
They have had large growth. They've had large downsides in their business. So I'm seeing all different stories within the real estate market for a lot of different people. It gives me really cool perspectives too.
Okay.
On what's going on. Yeah.
And so you have a lot of takeaways from that. And so that's what you were sharing with me. And we were kind of, bouncing some thoughts. And I wanted to kind of, I want to continue that conversation that we were having.
Yeah.
But before I do that, I just wanted to call you out for something. So that was February 5th.
5th, yeah.
And it is, as of filming, February 21st. And within a couple days of us talking, you sent out this thank you card.
Yeah.
And obviously we were supposed to meet last week, but we had the snowstorm and everything. Mm-hmm. Snowstorm.
Yeah. Well, for New England, it doesn't qualify. Other parts of the country, they would have shut down. So.
Sure, for sure. But anyway, so I'm just going to read it for everybody. Thank you for the invitation to be on your podcast, Jeremy. It is always incredible speaking with you and discussing business. Looking forward to expanding what we started discussing more on business, life, and mindset. Anthony. Yeah. And so a couple of things stood out to me with this. First and foremost, the fact that you sent a thank you card for an invitation. Yeah. So that was, to me, touching and big.
Yeah.
So I've had obviously a lot of people on the podcast, and all of them have said thank you in their own way. Mm-hmm. But this really resonates with me because nobody takes the time to actually write a note these days.
Yeah.
They write an email. Yeah. That's low investment cost, right? Mm-hmm. But to handwrite a note, because this is not a send out cards kind of thing. You know, like this is a handwritten note. Take the time, put it in the post office, et cetera. And I know that you guys have mail pickup.
And apologies for the legibility on that. But.
But that's the thing about it. Like the legibility factor is like, that's your writing.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether or not it's like the neatest, it's that it's your words and you took the time to write it. That's what counts.
Yeah.
And I think so that's the other takeaway from this is not so much the content of it, but the fact that you took the time to do it, you personalized it to the conversation that we were having. And you said, you know what? Who the hell cares about whether or not my handwriting is the neatest?
Yeah.
It's coming from me.
Exactly.
Which is where the truth is.
Yeah. And so one of the things too, what you just said is something I try and do a lot and not perfect in any way. And we all fall short at all things at times. And it's really recognizing being present of like, I understand what we were talking about. I enjoyed that conversation for the brief period that we had it, but I enjoyed it and I want to recognize it. Mm-hmm. And I want you to know that I want to have more of these conversations, regardless of where that ends up.
Right.
Like the trajectory of where things go. And I think that goes back to real estate in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Of regardless of what happens in the real estate market and what happens in my business, the way I bring value and help people is the reason I'm doing it.
Okay. So
like that is a hard thing to gap.
Right.
In real life of like, I have a job and a career. I'm just here to bring value and help people.
Right.
And how does that play out in all the scenarios of my real life?
Right.
Especially when you start talking about finances and I have to make a living.
Yeah.
And that's a real thing. Well, like there are all these things that come out of that, but I try and slow down enough that I'm just recognizing the moment that happened.
Right.
And that's it. Everything past that will fall in its place.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I first started Madore photography, almost 12 years ago now, it was based on the general, and I wasn't able to summarize it the way you just did right now, but it was more of an internal belief that it wasn't about the goal. It was about the journey. Exactly. It was about, so if you're destination driven, you're always going to be just looking for the next.
Oh yeah.
But they're things or ideas, right? Which isn't a bad thing to have goals in front of you.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're almost necessary, I would argue.
Yeah.
Like you have to have them.
Correct. Because if you don't have an ever moving goal, you're going to end up plateauing, right? But it's about the journey to the goal that is in itself, for me, the fulfillment.
Exactly.
And this is a journey to a goal. And it might not be the goal to stand out as the thank you card writer, right? Yeah. but it helps develop a reputation and a rapport that you don't have elsewhere.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
A lot of agents really need to recognize the value in that and capitalize on that. Because if you're using it transactionally, like if you go into it with a transactional mindset, you're going to have, your numbers driven goals.
Yes.
But your long-term business, as long-term agents have realized, comes from not the transactions, but the
relationships.
Yeah.
And I've actually come to view this in a couple of different ways. And if I get Kellerisms and KW baked into this, I apologize. I tried to stay agnostic to everything.
No, definitely spin it from the KW. That's okay
a lot
with
of
me.
the training and things that they brought, it changed my perception about a lot of things. Yeah, Kellerisms.
I like that.
But I got licensed in the industry in 2016, and I essentially walked in with, I'm not the smartest person ever to live.
Right.
And I'm just going to take whatever is given in front of me and run with that as much as I can. And the first thing that I learned at KW, or one of the big things I learned in the beginning, is that they have a really foundational belief system. And they say the belief system drives everything else. And we're 100% in business and we're entrepreneurs. And we love entrepreneurs and how they think. The thing they tend to do is they move so fast, they break things.
Okay.
And they move so fast that they don't have a system and a way to process all of this.
Okay.
So we need our beliefs in the way we structure ourselves.
Okay.
Independent of business goals. And then we're going to operate through that.
Parallels.
Exactly.
Yep. So your business goals should not be necessarily attached, but they should be running parallel to your belief
100%.
systems.
100%. And so I think that comes into play big when you start talking about we're salespeople. And you can run a sales business really headstrong and break through walls and just get deals done.
Yep.
And that 100% works.
Yep.
If your goal is to do the most deals.
Right.
And agents are in this great position where there are a lot of ways we can do business. Like there's almost unlimited ways.
It really is. It's a smorgasbord. It's a buffet.
Yeah. And what I always do talking to people is I'm like, we're starting with you and we're building from there.
Okay.
I can start with real estate and show you how to sell real estate, but I don't know where to start there.
Okay. So instead of being a one size fits all, it's a all sizes fit one type of thing.
Exactly.
Where you start at the core of the agent, what drives them, where their values are.
Yep.
And then you build out from there.
Exactly.
Okay.
And a lot of it is behavioral style too. There are people who are very successful agents. They create great experiences for their clients and they're really good in that customer service role. They may not want to be in front of 25 people in a seminar. And I know there are agents, specifically one out of Newton, Massachusetts, who runs 2 seminars a month.
Okay.
And her entire business revolves around that.
Wow.
She is not worried about Facebook marketing. She's not worried about mailers. She's not worried about all these other things that people talk about and have great success in.
Yep.
She's like, this is my piece.
Okay.
I get in front of crowds of people. I partner with great vendors, lenders, attorneys, and I give education.
Okay.
With no ask at the end of, you want to talk about real estate? I just taught you everything I know.
Sure.
As far as purchasing and selling homes. If that's a need for you right now, we'll have a conversation.
Right.
If it's not, you have the information.
Right.
And so that's her piece and she runs with that. And so finding that for each individual person can be very difficult, but there's a path somewhere.
Okay.
And I like figuring out that, not problem, but
it's
kind of a puzzle to put together for people.
What are some of the steps that you take to find out that puzzle?
So a lot of that is, behavioral style, asking how they operate, what do they like doing? Sometimes with real estate, it's very rarely the first career choice. And so were you successful before and how did that look? What industry are you coming from?
Yeah.
And, what's that path for you? Because there's something about that career you didn't like that you're changing now. But there's also a reason you got into it.
Yep.
And there's a break there.
Okay.
So let's find why that break happened.
Yep.
And let's move a path through. Everyone has some type of value to give the market. And they also have a skill in let's say something that makes them enjoy it.
Right.
You can choose that in real estate. And oftentimes I think our conversation started with people's either myth about what they're doing or misconception about, I can't do that.
Right.
You know, I see a lot of people successful at that.
Yeah.
And
well, you touched upon that with the seminars thing.
Exactly.
Just now,
yeah.
And that's not for everybody.
It's not.
Honestly, that would scare the heck out of me, you know, because my emotional and mental drain to put on a seminar would be extremely high. And because I'm not really a group presenter. Yep. That's just not who I am. I'm a one-on-one talker.
Yeah, I'm very similar in that way. Yeah.
Investing in personal conversations. And I find that I can't do that in a group setting.
Yes.
And there's probably ways to do it that I haven't figured out or that maybe I've heard of and I just kind of, discounted.
But one of the easiest ones is, funny enough, it's not cliche, but it is I need to get to know you.
Yep.
I can't prescribe a solution to a problem if I haven't diagnosed the problem yet.
Right.
So let's have a conversation around what's going on.
Yep.
And I can get to a point where maybe I can prescribe you the best solution, or we can just work through ways that you feel comfortable enough to start taking action. And that's the biggest gap of all this conversation, I think, is that people see people doing successful things. They don't feel that they can do it. They also feel like, well, if I'm not doing it, I may or may not be successful.
Right.
And that's not true.
No.
Like many things can be true at once. And that's one of them. It's like you can do other things and be super successful.
It's true. And I'm sure that there are a few basic principles within the real estate industry that if you don't do them, it's going to be a really tough ride for you.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of optional avenues that you don't have to go down. And you and I were talking about how what agents need to really capitalize on is what do you do best?
Yep.
Do more of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a very good conversation with someone and they thanked me for it later. And I was like, I just told you what I thought. Like I wasn't trying to make a point or anything. Right. But they had this very similar thought pattern of what you were telling me you were hearing from other people. They had this reservation about doing something in their business. And they're like, it's not really for me. And guess what? Maybe it's not. And that's completely okay.
That's okay.
That's perfectly fine.
That's okay.
I knew this person did something at such a high level and so well that I was like, would you be willing to take away time from that? Because I know the amount of people that you affect in this thing you do. This person's very good at writing and they're very good at passing off information, and they work with charities, nonprofits in their community, like at a really high level. And I was like, anything you do takes away from that, and you feel this need in your business to go do that, I already view you as successful. I think you should view yourself as successful, and you do a lot of business.
Got it.
What would be affected if you stopped doing those other things and you replaced it with the thing you see as, let's say, the shiny object syndrome?
Yeah.
Like,
it's easy to chase those.
It's unnecessary, but they came back and thanked me later for it. And I think the big piece of that is they recognized that they were doing something good.
They needed to be validated, most likely.
Yeah. And it's not a negative thing.
No.
It's just recognize that you do something so well that I don't think you need to take that away from the people around you.
So I would argue for a moment, I agree with you on that, but I would argue that the reasons why people sometimes lose sight of the thing that they are doing exceptionally well is because it looks dull in comparison to what that other person's doing, which is maybe the latest and greatest, or maybe it's a new hook or whatever trendy maybe, or just simply outside of the existing line of work that they're doing.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, well, I mean, it's a lot like marketing homes.
Yeah.
You can't market all the homes the same way.
Yeah.
Every home, for the most part, has its very unique features, its area, its amenities that you really need to capitalize on because it's going to appeal to a different market, right? Absolutely. So if you marketed all the homes the exact same way, you'd probably start homogenizing a little bit too much, and it would just be a general, one size fits all, and it doesn't work very well.
100%.
And so likewise, agents also need to take a look at what they are doing. And what is it that you are doing on a day-to-day basis that is really driving your business, even though it might seem basic.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we confuse the basic with with what doesn't work.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is the basics sometimes are the things that a lot of people skip over entirely.
Absolutely.
Chasing after that new and shiny.
Yeah. And one thing, I heard this recently. So if I say something, it sounds very smart, it may not just be me. I talk to a lot of really smart people.
Well, we're operating off of 4,000 plus years of humanity here, so.
But they said consistency is one of the biggest factors in real estate. and it's either your secret sauce or your silent killer.
Fair.
And I see that come up a lot, in that the consistency is some people's secret sauce, and it becomes mundane, like you said. Like it becomes very like, I'm doing the same thing over again. And in business, the best thing for a business person is dependability. Even if it's a small amount of income, revenue, whatever it may be, if it's dependable, I like that.
I would rather trickle over a long period of time than a floodgate once.
And that's consistency.
Yep.
So if I can consistently do activities and create results from those activities, stick with that.
Yep.
You can build creativity and fun on top of those things.
You can incorporate it into your workflow.
Yeah.
By challenging yourself in very diminishing return basis.
Exactly.
We do that actually a lot here at the office.
Yeah.
Keith especially seeks out pretty much the diminishing return areas of business, as far as like the creativity and the technological elements, so that we can really eke out those last points of contact before we get to the point of actual diminishing returns. Yep. And it's important to do that because it really maximizes what your output is. And so we found that as far as your consistency and your reliability, that has been and will always be the foundation of Madore photography, because it's not about producing the best content. It's about producing reliable content.
Absolutely.
And holding a reliable price point, a reliable uptime as far as our how far out we book, et cetera. Yep. All of those elements go into the lifeblood of the business.
Yep.
And if we chase the new and shiny, we would actually throw into question all of those other reliability elements, because we'd forever be bouncing around from a project to project. And that's not going to be good for the business long term.
Absolutely.
And so we really have to think long and hard and vet out ideas before we just toss them out into the stratosphere of clients.
Yeah.
Because if we don't do that, we end up having to kind of eat crow, or just it backfires on us. And that's just not good for the lifeblood of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. You made me think of so many things during that. It's hard to choose where to go.
Sorry.
No, it's awesome. But it's watching people build businesses, and back to the consistency piece of it being a silent killer, is that a lot of times, especially focusing on newer agents and people coming into the industry, is that this is an industry of huge opportunity. There's more than enough for each individual to make what they want to make and do the things they want to do with their life through the vehicle of real estate.
Sure.
The issue becomes there's not enough for everyone, though.
Right.
And that's a very tough thing to juggle between people of like, the market's really tough. There are things that are happening that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis to get things done. And I have to go through this. And when I look up at North Central Massachusetts and there's tens of thousands of homes sold every year.
Yeah.
Well, my goal isn't tens of thousands of homes.
Right.
My goal is this little small piece, not even a 1% piece of the pie.
Yeah.
And all I have to do is bring value to people to go and get that, and make them know I'm available, know I do this on a regular basis, and trust me in my craft.
But it's about understanding what those values are.
Exactly.
And that's where the piece of the pie comes from.
Yes, exactly.
And those values are going to be dependent on your demographic that you're servicing.
Absolutely.
Right. So we actually we're interviewing 3 people today for job positions for Madore photography. Yep. We're heading into the spring market. And so we're making sure that we stay ahead of the curve by training people early before the spring market. That way we have them ready to go, turnkey employees. And these are all W-2 full-time employees. These are not subcontractors, so that we have that reliability factor, right?
Yep.
But the challenge is that it's not just like real estate itself. Photography is not a one-size-fits-all. Everyone has their own disciplines and their own preferences and their own values that drive them. And so it's about aligning their values with our company values and vice versa, right? And so we have to hire, honestly, mostly on personality and approach versus the actual artistic elements. Of course, they have to succeed in the artistic elements, right? But the truth of the matter is, when you're marketing to realtors, say in Concord, Lexington, very different market, very different values to Leominster, Fitchburg, right?
The consumer's expectations of that product change too.
Entirely. And instead of it being, I'm doing 50 homes a year, I would say bread and butter kind of stuff, you're doing 10 or 15 homes a year at high dollar values. So each and every one of those homes is a really pristine portfolio piece.
Yeah.
The staging, the preparation that has gone into it has been weeks of work versus days of work. You're not, delegating to the homeowner a set list of responsibilities. You're usually calling in your vendor team to do it for them. So
it's a concierge service experience.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so your values as a realtor, just like your values as a photographer, might change depending on the client you're working with, right?
100%.
And so I think that for new agents, they need to understand what their values are and look for the market that shares that value so they can naturally market to them.
Absolutely. That makes perfect sense. So yeah, I love that.
But it has to be that parallel.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right? Oh, yeah. Well, here's the thing is if you get any kind of kink in the day when you approach your day and you say, I have to provide these things for people, and that butts against what I view as what I do well, not only what I do well, what I believe in and what I have to do to get the job done. And am I providing value to someone? Because there's a give and take here. This isn't a one way of I'm just giving value to other people.
Right.
It's that you get the fulfillment of helping people.
There has to be reciprocation.
Yes. And so if you don't get that, this job doesn't become as fun as it could be.
No.
And it really doesn't become fun quickly.
Yep.
Because it is a high stress environment a lot of times. And my kind of laugh at the real estate, especially people coming into it in their outside to in view of what real estate is they say, for instance, the most common is I want flexibility with my schedule. And I said, well, you just got into a job where your schedule is whoever hires you.
Right.
And their schedule dictates some of the things that you're now going to do in your life. Not saying there's no boundaries. You 100% can set boundaries for yourself and set clear expectations with your clients. And at the end of the day, if I have someone who works, for instance, overnights as a nurse, there are limited times in which I'm going to have very pointed conversations and be very, hey, this is what's happening.
Yep.
You're purchasing this property. We're under agreement and all these things are about to take place.
Right. You can't call that overnight nurse up at noontime the following day.
Yeah.
They're fast asleep, hopefully.
And so that isn't really the best example of flexibility in my life.
Right.
It doesn't mean I'm not going to do it and I'm going to give the best service I can. But some people walk into that industry saying, there's going to be so much flexibility. And
I set my own hours. I'm my own boss.
Yeah. And true. Facts. Yeah. Definitely something that's real and not always the case. So it's becoming really aware of the situation of what am I getting myself into? And then, like you said, I'm creating systems around all of that. Yep. I'm creating this experience that I give to people. I'm creating how do I live my life? Yep. And this business is good for the good it can do. Yep. It's not going to just make itself for you. Right. And that's very difficult to kind of formulate to someone who says, I don't like where I'm at. I want to get into an industry that has a completely no ceiling on it. It has no floor either. Watch out. So yeah. And I say that, lightly, but it's a big thing.
It has no ceiling and it has no floor.
It has no floor.
Like that. I like that.
So, it's not a trap door, so it's not a trick. But it's an incredible industry, and I love the years that I've spent in it so far. And I see so many different lifestyles and so many people finding different ways to do business that I encourage people to get into it as much as I can to get an understanding, if anything, of just like, this is how it works. You'll be better off for knowing real estate in any way that you get introduced to it.
Okay.
It doesn't mean you have to be a realtor.
Sure.
But it's kind of like the highest form of capitalism that we have in some ways. Okay. Of like creating your own business and what you say goes in your own business.
All right. Yeah. So it definitely is a sandbox approach.
Oh, 100%.
And so it caters to a zillion personalities.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, the diversity of personalities that we have encountered ourselves.
Yeah.
It's not a one size fits all like we talked about. But yeah, you are correct in saying that there is a lot of misnomers coming into it where people have these assumptions, Pinterest versus reality, right?
Yeah. HGTV.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Exactly. And it's not all glam.
Yeah.
It can be.
Yes.
It can be once you level up.
Yeah. You don't make $10,000 every 21 minutes.
No.
It's
you don't pick up the
not
phone
how it
and
goes.
land a sale immediately.
Yeah.
It does happen, but not frequently,
Yeah.
Houses can sit on markets for months if you price them wrong or you advertise them wrong, or they can move in 24 hours, even less.
Yeah.
you know, and it really depends on your reliability of how you market the property, how you prepare the client, how you price it, all that kind of stuff, as well as market conditions that you have absolutely no control over.
You don't. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the fun in it a little bit, is that if we treat ourselves, and I very much view us as professionals and people who do an amazing job. And if you think about it as a craft in what you're doing, I'll use an analogy, whether warranted or not, of like a doctor. If you are thinking of yourself as, I'm a professional doctor and I'm doing what I said of like diagnosing and prescribing things for people, of like, in this market, these are the things that are going to get you the best results. And I'm going to educate you on how to function in order to get the result of whatever you want to do. The best example of that's probably investment properties. People doing investments and saying, I'm growing financial wealth for myself and my family. I have a path in which we can walk through that and understand what's the best path for you right now and what can we grow to and get to.
Okay.
And if you view yourself as the doctor of, I need to understand and be able to walk through all these scenarios and look out for any changes and kind of know what's the pulse of the market right now. Where are all my vital signs?
Okay.
What do I need to view as like potential risks and hazards for my client?
It's holistic.
Yeah. Like all of these things factor in.
Yeah.
That's a lot to manage at all times. Mm-hmm. But if you take that approach of like, I'm looking out for all of these things and I'm just saying, where does all of this walk my client through? Right. And where am I most protecting them? And where am I most giving them the most value and gain? Yep. Value meaning, like for an investor, the most profit. Mm-hmm. And mitigating all the risk I can. I think those are really good ways of like, I'm going to get really hone in and be good at my craft and know all of these things for my client's sake, because this is one of the, just like your health, this is one of the biggest investments you're ever going to go through.
Right.
And so this is a serious thing.
Yeah. So you have to really tweak those factors.
Yeah.
And we talked about diminishing returns a little bit ago. Yeah. That's where the excellence comes into play.
Yeah.
Because if you broad brush everything, it'll probably get you through in decent markets.
Yeah. Well,
2020
and one,
right.
Probably be it, rising tides.
Yeah. Yeah. But
bring up all ships. So you're going to be fine. And there are times where that's not the market. No. And that's not where you're living in.
For sure.
Today.
For sure. That was last year. Yeah. And that was a real challenge for a lot of agents. We saw a large departure of agents from the business or a return to their primary path careers while also continuing their license part-time.
Yep.
And that's a real challenge for their own client base because it's hard for them to do their career path as a realtor justice
100%
when their focus is split. Yeah. Right. And maybe that's okay.
It is okay. Yeah.
That's not to say that people who do real estate part-time shouldn't do it. It's that it is a determine your path and stick with it kind of thing.
Yeah. And I think, one of the reasons I say getting into real estate is one of the best things too, is because it can be a part-time thing and you can use that license for so many different areas. You can use it for yourself and investments. You can use it as a part-time.
Right. It's a tool.
It's why I start with like its goals and values of what do you want this to do for you?
Yep. What's the outcome?
And there's no wrong answers. It's your choice.
Yeah.
Like you can go about this any different way.
Sure.
I actually love hearing the stories. I do love the people who run big businesses and have huge real estate teams and do all of those exciting things.
Yeah.
And we kind of champion those people a lot in the real estate world. But I also like the teacher who sells 5 houses a year.
Sure.
And that's like just as cool to me.
Yep.
Who like, I'm a full-time teacher. I have all my benefits.
Yeah.
I am rewarded in my career and I like it, but I also sell houses and I get to do this other thing that provides me an income that I wouldn't have otherwise.
Right.
And it's just as fulfilling.
Yep.
And that works for some people really well.
Yep.
And in no sense would I ever go to that person and say, you know what you could do? You could build this really big business.
Right. Right. No, because they're at a spot in their life that they really find their joy in both things that they're stepping into.
Yeah.
And that's admirable. It really is
100%. Yeah.
You don't have to go big or go home. Mm-hmm. There is that in between that does exist and it exists successfully. The hardest part, of course, is people going from one career path completely unplugging from it and getting into real estate.
Yeah. I almost never recommend it.
It's
what's
the fall off after a year? Like
87% of after 2 years of people are out of the industry. Yeah.
It's funny because when
I think a lot of that is it's not completely their fault. I don't think.
Right.
But I think a lot of it has to do with the instruction and letting them know of, hey, these are the risks and you're opening a business.
Okay.
businesses in general don't do well in a 5-year span.
Yeah.
You're also operating one that has a bigger fall off than that.
Okay.
Don't really get rid of the foundational pieces of your life, because the moment that your life is making you make real estate sales and it's forced, everyone knows that. Whether they can articulate it or not, they feel it from you. So the moment I have to make money from real estate, and real estate is this thing where it's a community-based economy, where I am giving value to my community. They're reciprocating that by hiring me to sell and buy homes with them.
Yeah.
If I have to depend on that as a lifestyle choice and it has to pay my bills, and I have a bill next week and I have to go into the market and talk to people and say, hey, I'm providing value. Will you buy and sell a house with me right now? I know the second half of that sentence means more to you than the first half of that sentence.
Yep.
Like, you're not here to bring me value.
Right.
And sometimes people intuitively can hear that.
Sure.
They call it commission breath.
Commission breath. I've never heard that term.
I'm not a big fan of the saying, but I think it pretty much says what I'm saying.
Sure.
In that, that's one of the missteps I see most often with people.
It's a transaction-oriented goal.
Exactly. And I'm not knocking it, because it's a real thing. Like, everyone has to have their foundational financials set. Like, you have to live your life and you have to support yourself.
Right.
And it goes back to that conversation we've been having of, you have to bring something of value to the people that you're bringing value to. Consistently
and without expectation of repayment.
100%.
Because as soon as you have the expectation of repayment, it ends up being a race to the bottom.
And it comes back tenfold if you do it that way. Like, it comes back so much stronger of, this person's giving me so much and they've never asked for anything the whole time. Yeah. Yeah.
I can definitely see that. All right. Yeah. That's good info.
Yeah.
That's really good info.
I'm sorry if I get you off track at any point in time.
No.
I get excited about
it. But that's why we do this, Anthony. It's not so that we don't have an agenda.
Yeah.
Right. And so I enjoy sitting down with people and just really diving into something that matters to them.
Yep. Because
we're identifying our podcast guests that we've been having on, all have been invited to us, by either myself or Keith or Danielle. Mm-hmm. And we go out and we kind of look at our client base and we look at people that we admire.
Yeah.
Really
appreciate that.
And we want to have people on who we admire, because we admire them for a reason. And the reason that I admire you is that you've always been a forward-thinking individual that we've communicated with. And now with your new position at KWNC, it's one of those kinds of situations where there's a lot of education that you are providing to your agent bases. Mm-hmm. And if we're able to kind of plug into that knowledge base that you're developing, it would also be an exchange of goods. Love there, that. And again, the value, right? You're providing big value to me, and I'm hoping that I'm providing that back to 100%. You, right?
Yeah.
Because the way that agents approach business is extremely important, not just for their businesses. Mm-hmm. It's important for the market. It's important for the vendors. It's important for the leadership. Yep. All of that dovetails into them as the core, because without the agent, there's no real estate transaction success. There's no vendors that are waiting to photograph the homes and inspect and all that kind of stuff. The agent really is the hub and spoke of the entire sales process.
Absolutely.
And instead of thinking as a transactional basis, it's all about relationships. Because if they understand that the hub and spoke relationship is exactly that, I'm one point of contact for 10,000 people. And I'm about making matches and understanding how those puzzle pieces move. The sooner they get down to that basis right there, the faster their success is going to happen.
100%. Yeah.
And if they just see themselves as this outside transaction coordinator or someone who just steers a general path to a document signing, it's never going to succeed long term.
Yeah. And you just said something it's true on both ends of the relationships too, because we see that with vendors and all of the professionals that we partner with on every given day as realtors. The consumer, the moment they think of me in that way, that's the moment I have a business.
Okay.
As the moment I'm the spoke of information to get you all of those people and those resources, and you say, realtor friend, the one that I do all my business with, or I've never done business with before in my life, I know you know this information and I'm going to call out to you. You're my first thought to go to with this information.
Right.
What's happening in Westminster?
Sure.
Something happened. I need information about it. I need help. My cousin has an unexpected life change.
Right.
How would you navigate this? Like the moment those things happen in people's minds and you're the person they call and you're the spoke, so to speak, that's when the agents become successful.
Right.
And it's kind of ethereal in a sense of like, well, how do you do that? There's no good answer on that, but the path is always through the person in my understanding.
Okay.
Like I'm going to go to you and your skills and how do you build relationships with people, build really good, strong relationships where you're getting information and education to them and they view you as a trustworthy person. Well, that's the key. Like
it's integration.
It's
integration.
The moment someone turns around and says, I have to call Anthony or I have to call Jeremy, I know they're going to have the answer to this.
Right.
That's the moment you're not set, but you've done
you've already primed the system.
Done for that person.
You've primed the system.
Yeah, exactly.
And
then we're good to go.
Correct.
And then I can actually do the functional things of my job. And this becomes the functional versus the fiduciary conversation of like, there are functional tasks that have to get done. And then there are the fiduciary responsibilities that I provide people. And how do I approach that and all of the code of ethics things that come into that.
Right. Well, those are the parallels.
Represent people. Exactly.
Those are the parallels.
It's we're right back to that same thing.
Yep.
So I think you just hit that perfectly.
So from an integration standpoint, let's talk a little bit about that, because that's, I think, how does an agent, and I know that this is really dependent on the agent as far as how they go ahead and do it, but what are some ways, I guess is the best way to say it, that an agent can become more integrated in their local community, in a flexible manner where it's not really a lot of high pressure. Cause I know that it's not everybody's good at networking events, right?
Correct.
And then of course, networking events have, and I'm going to borrow your term, commission breath. But there's a challenge there, right? Because like you go into it, like I got business cards.
Yeah.
When I first started doing this, I had business cards in my pocket. I very rarely handed them out.
Yeah.
It was about going around just simply meeting people and asking about them, not telling them about me.
Yeah.
I'd wait for them to ask me.
I'm the worst on that. I don't have business cards. So it's like,
my wife's going to be listening to this later. She's like, no, you don't have business cards, Jeremy.
How would you like me to contact you later?
Exactly.
Like, I would love to carry this conversation forward. Do you want to meet up for coffee soon? Do you want to have a text conversation, or should I call you tomorrow?
Sure.
And I just exchanged information with you.
Yeah.
Like being human and just acting like this is not a setup scenario for me to get something out of it is the easiest path, and to create that, like, I'm just here to have a conversation and learn from people.
Yep. And
that's it.
Yep.
And if I act in that fashion, it becomes much more easy.
Right. Because it comes natural.
It does.
So if you're inquiring as to what their career path is, or where their life choices have brought them, or where they're headed, it shows that you are genuinely interested in what their dynamic is.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that you're now vetting them as to potential sale.
Exactly.
That's you understanding where they fall in your range of categories.
Exactly.
So that you can understand whether or not they are someone that you could probably profile with.
Yeah.
And at that point you're now quantifying them as, I share similar values. What can I do for them, to give them value?
It's very much let's create a relationship and see where this goes and where can I help you?
It's dating.
Exactly.
Client dating.
I want to get back to one of the things you said of like, what are the prescribed parameters? No, it's fine. I love it. But what are the prescribed things that we can do as realtors to ensure that we are growing a business? Like that is still part of this conversation of you have to be growing a business and helping people find, sell, and buy, like do all of those things. Like it's how we're going to make our money. There's the Millionaire Real Estate Agent book, page 138. There's actually a graph that breaks down. There's two ways to do this. There's prospecting and marketing.
Yep.
Prospecting, I'm not in love with that word. I'd more say relationship building.
Sure.
But there are
a lot of hats on that one.
Yeah. So there's the straightforward, I need a sale today type of tactics of, I talked to a for sale by owner, someone who's trying to list their property on their own. They raised their hand. They said, I want to sell my house, which is a good start, but they've also said, I don't want to talk to a realtor. In doing so, you can have that conversation if you'd like. It's not a me thing. I found that out quickly. I want you to want me to in this process and view me as valuable, and then I'll proceed. some agents love that. That's their behavior style.
Oh,
of like,
for sure.
This is
They're
a
like,
negotiation.
come at me, bro.
And yeah, like, let's go. There's expired listings. People have hired someone. So they raised their hand, said, I want to sell my house.
It didn't succeed.
It didn't succeed with the agent. It was either a poor experience or just it didn't work out for whatever reason.
Right.
There's 1,000
or life
ways
changes, whatever.
100%. Have conversations with those people and see what went wrong, and if you can provide value to help them.
Sure.
Because they may still need to sell that
Overcome
property.
objections, yeah.
Not as much of a thing in our market. Houses are selling, and we have an inventory issue. So not necessarily the best tactic at the time. There's also
and
not
for
working. Yeah, you go.
Back up. And for that matter, they're selling sometimes even in spite of the poor experience with the agent.
Exactly.
So a fast market helps bury poor agents.
Yes.
And that's a really disastrous thing for the industry.
Yep. And it's one of your best ways, like you said, building your portfolio and showing what you do for your clients. That would be one of the places where a really good agent and someone with success and a history can show that portfolio and say, this is how I do things.
Yep.
And change that conversation really quickly.
Right. I derailed you. Sorry.
No, you're great. There's about 20 things on this list.
Yep.
Working in community events, working closely with your PTA, working closely with nonprofits and organizations. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily in our area, but in other parts of the country, working in partnerships with people who have transfers and job relocations.
Yeah.
There's an endless list of things to do on that chart.
And what of course, there's all the associations that can be part of and all that kind of stuff.
Chambers, anything like that. Knowing people who are in business and then just knowing a certain segment or whatever demographic of people that you're going to work with closely. Mm. Again, it goes back to start with you.
Right.
What are you going to go do at a high level and wake up every day and say, I'm really passionate about nonprofits. Yep. I'm going to work at the local nonprofits in my community and get to know all those people. The relationships I build with them and the relationships they have in the market will get them to hire me. And I'm doing it with no ask. I'm just being a participant in my community.
Yeah.
And I call that like the mayoral approach.
Sure.
Or like you're the mayor of your local
I get that.
town and city.
Yep.
That's 100% a way to do it.
Yep.
The other way of doing it is just your personal relationships that you already have. Look into if you have a community of people that you're already closely bound to and you have those relationships, that's where you start. There's an amazing statistic that we have at KW of that. If you have 201 or more people in a database, so I'm going to go to a technology conversation real quickly, but you have your database and you have regular conversations and communications with those 201 or more people. 200 people is, but if you think about it, Leominster's 40,000.
Okay. It's small in comparison to the total yield, but yeah.
Correct. But I'm marketing myself to a whole community of a city when I put on a property.
Okay.
So my outreach is actually fairly easy in comparison.
Okay. All right.
And when I say relationship, I don't mean you get dinner with all these people every week.
Fair.
It's just they know who I am. I know who they are. If I were to call, they would know.
Okay.
This is Anthony. This is Jeremy. Yeah, pick up the phone. How are you
Makes
doing?
Makes sense. Right.
You have more people in your phone than you think, by the way, Jeremy. There's more than 200, I promise.
I know. I know. I've been weeding some old contacts out.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so if you have 201 or more and you know their phone number and their email, so you know how to call them, text them, and email them.
Right.
And you know where they live, fairly important for realtors that we know the properties in which they're living in. You can make $116,000 per year by having really good communications consistently with 200 people.
This has been diluted down to a statistic.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So with that information, I actually already know the path. And it honestly, adding someone to a database and talking to them consistently is just important as removing someone from a database and not talking to them if they don't bring you joy and happiness, just like in real life. So like that is, I get to control and I get to choose the path in which I'm doing this.
Fair.
And it's really not as overly complex as we can make it. And as humans, we're going to make it complex. Like just consistently, we're just going to make it more and more complex. We're going to try and build. Well, we're just going to try and build more.
Yeah.
Like I know how to do this. Let's do it another way.
Right.
Let's find a different way to make this happen.
Yeah.
And it's important in strategy in certain situations, but as my business as a whole, as I run it, you really can continue to do the same things and provide the same things for people and make sure it's timely and make sure it's effective for them. Right. So if I'm talking about a timely material of this is happening in my community and I want you to know it, you're important to me, that's going to go a long way for a long time. You can continue to do that for people. When it's inauthentic, it doesn't work. But we really know that you don't need to have this whole massive marketing scheme for you as a realtor. unless your goal is, I'm going to sell 150 homes a year.
Right. So you have to scale it.
You do.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the decision of what is my business.
And what are your values and what do I desire
Exactly.
from it, right?
But if we're just simply looking at median income for our area, $116,000 is doing very well for yourself.
Yes.
And it takes 200 relationships with most people have that.
Yep.
So you can really just build upon those relationships and say, I'm giving you a service. And if it's valuable to you, you're going to recommend me to other people. And I'm naturally going to build that 200 people to 500.
Sure.
And I'm naturally going to build that 500 to 1,000.
Yeah.
And you can build it slow, progressively.
Systematically.
And it doesn't break because you've done it that way. But the moment I go after an entire market and market myself to an entire market, there's a lot of things of I'm solving a lot of problems. Like I'm solving every problem that's possible within my community, which I may or may not be equipped to do immediately.
Got it.
Over time, I'm definitely going to understand all those things.
Right.
But walking into it, I may or may not be able to solve all
It's
these
a big
issues.
question mark.
And it's a big question mark. So from the prospecting standpoint of that chart, it's going to be relationship based mostly. And who do I already know? We call it like the sphere of influence, and people I have influenced and influenced me already. The other side of marketing is it's dollar driven. So not a lot of time, but a lot of money investment. Mm-hmm. And then on the reverse, depending on where you are in your career, the prospecting never goes away, but that's a time thing. Mm-hmm. I have to invest time in people, and those are my deposits. Mm-hmm. Not really asking for withdrawals until it's necessary, and they're saying, I'm ready.
Sure.
But it's completely putting deposits in for people. Yeah. And then on the opposite side, I'm putting money into a system, and I'm doing advertising, and I'm doing marketing, and I'm running these events, or I'm doing different things to get my name out there to create more relationships and build that database of people that I can have influence with. So I would say maybe not a direct thing. It's very hard for me to put a direct thing unless I'm saying, Jeremy, how's this path going to work for you?
Sure.
My favorite part of this conversation is that if you look out throughout the country, and there's a lot of data on this and people who know the breakdowns of who's doing what. Just like I said, all these paths are correct for the right person. There's no agent who's working at a high level who has a highly profitable business that does more than 3 of them. So I'm either doing expireds, FSBOs, and I'm talking to my sphere of influence, or I'm doing community events, working with nonprofits.
They're picking a specialty.
No one's doing more than 3.
Right.
And the biggest thing I've seen as part of that turnover rate of agents is they say, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to do direct mailers to a neighborhood, and I'm going to do neighborhood marketing of myself. And I say, okay, I have a program for that. Yeah. That program is going to go over a year, and it's going to have to be very consistent, methodical, and you can do this. Right. Like it's very much a possibility. You cannot change that before the yield comes. You have to be in this for a year, and you have to wait for that return to make sure your investment actually worked. Yep. Because that's a money thing and a time thing. And so people will say, I haven't gotten a whole lot out of that yet. Been 6-7 months. We got 6 months to go. Sure. Nah, I think I'm gonna start calling expireds.
No. You can't change your gears.
Exactly.
You can't. Not early on. Yeah. If you're making slow lane shifts over time. It adds up fast. Yep. But if you're trying to quickly change a lane, especially early in the career path, you're not going to stick with something long enough to see whether or not it's going to pan out.
Not only that is you have to be in it long enough to know what the kind of where things come to a head. Right. What's your baseline? What problem am I actually solving for these people? What comes up all the time? Yep. And just like I said, like the doctors go into specialties almost always. Like the majority of people and how that works is like everyone goes into a specialty into their field eventually. And agents are the same way. You're going to find a market in which works for you really well.
Photographers are the same way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
They really are.
You have real estate, you have wedding, you have all these different
There's a lot portraits. There's a significant amount of disciplines in photography. And there are there's obviously a portion of photographers that do it all. Yeah. But then you have to ask yourself, how well are they doing it all?
You just said skill. And a lot of times this is not a skill question. And I tell people that it's not because you're not good. You're very skilled at this in a lot of avenues. And I've already seen some skill developed in people. They didn't give it a long enough time to really use that skill to help others and see the results for themselves. Yeah. And so, that's a big piece of it. Yeah. Of like, you do have to build that and say,
well, that's the consistency.
Am I parking this avenue of production because it doesn't work? because I can almost guarantee it does. There's someone doing it at a high level somewhere. It works. It works. Does it not work for you because there are things that are going to prevent you from doing it well? And whether that's just like, I don't like that aspect. Like you said, I don't like community events. I don't like public speaking. Well, don't put yourself in that. I want you to wake up and do the things you want to do every day.
To resonate with it.
And at the same time, you can be successful at this. I very, very seldom would I say someone cannot be successful in real estate. There is an avenue even if it's just a position and a role. Like maybe you are a buyer's agent and you don't like working with sellers and that conversation does not resonate with you. Like for me, I found out pretty quickly, I really like working with sellers because it's a conversation around money, net sale price. Does this work for you? There are things that have to happen in order for me to do the next thing.
Got it.
And can we put this puzzle together to make sure that happens?
Yep.
And then am I going to do right by you to do all the things to market and sell your property? And if you believe in me to do that, we're going to move forward. With a buyer, as much as I enjoy that working with buyers when I was in production, it's a lot of, I know you love this house. We're going to do everything to get it. And you still might not get it. And there's a lot of like
emotional roller coaster.
Darn it. Like you have that like let down a little bit, especially in the market over the last 4 years.
Yeah.
Like that's a big piece of the puzzle.
There's that feeling probably that you're failing your client somehow.
Exactly.
Even though it's not within your control.
Exactly. And just as an example, if you're a person who really enjoys that and says, you know what, I have all the solutions and tools and I know I can represent you to the highest ability, where it's going to take you maybe 3 or 4 offers and then we're going to get it. It might happen on the first one. That's definitely a possibility.
Sure.
It might happen on the 5th one.
Yep.
And I can guide someone through that because it is an emotional aspect of what's going to happen. But if I can get you into that and I can make you feel comfortable and go through that process with me, and that gets me excitement of, hey, there's going to be some failure here.
Yeah.
And we're still going to get to the other side of it.
Right.
And that resonates with you to go do that.
You're a good buyer's agent.
You're going buyer's agent. And people do both. Like it's not
it's not either
binomial, like binary thing. Like they're going to work in both. But if you find that one of them really doesn't resonate with me and I really don't like this conversation with, I've talked to people who they just don't like that conversation with sellers because it doesn't have the emotional factor of home ownership. And I get to own a home and this is like a big deal. And at the end,
dreaming's different.
Yeah. Yeah. And like at the end, like I'm so excited because I've accomplished this feat.
Sure.
Where selling doesn't always have that effect. Sometimes it's a very sad experience. Sometimes you're selling for the wrong reasons.
Yep.
And you have no choice in the matter.
Yep.
And that's just going to affect people different ways and how you approach it. And I like all of those things from real estate a lot. But yeah, you're going to find your path through all those things. Yeah. And I've already lost where we were going.
No, honestly, the meandering is in itself enjoyable. Well, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I'm really glad that I had you in and that I invited you over.
Appreciate it.
I'd like to pick up round 2 at some point.
Okay.
Especially as you continue to work within the position that you're in. And I'm curious to see how that takes the office.
Yeah.
How that takes you and your family.
I'm lucky. I have a pretty good opportunity for growth.
You do.
For where I'm sitting. So I'm very, very honored to be where I'm at.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you also have the availability of mentorship. I know that there are those who have gone before you who have a lot of advice to give you. And I know that you're also one of those types of people that will take that advice, or at least will give it a good, strong listen.
Absolutely.
And again, apply it to your method of operation, your values. But I'm really excited to see how this shapes up for you.
I appreciate that. So you're awesome, Jeremy. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome, Anthony.
Awesome.